Sing joyously to Elohim our strength, and raise a shout for the Elohim of Jacob. Take up the song. Sound the timbrel and melodious lyre and harp. Blow the shofar on the new moon, on the full moon of our feast day. For it is a law for Israel, a ruling for the Elohim of Jacob. He imposed it as a decree upon Joseph when he went forth from the land of Egypt. I heard a language that I knew not. Give thanks and praise, my brothers and sisters. This is the Kingdom Road radio show, and this is a very special day. We are going into the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets. And to have this show at this time, out here in California, it's not yet sunset, so I'll be getting into that after this show. But for many of you in the Midwest and on the East Coast, the festival has already started, the new moon. So blessed Yom Teruah to everyone, and I give thanks for this opportunity to be here with you all today. It feels good to play the shofar every time. Okay, so today the show is actually going to be about the Prince of Peace, based on Isaiah chapter 9. We're going to go over just a few things about the Prince of Peace. And in this time of where there's so many different wars, and rumors of wars going on the earth, I felt like it would be really important to go over the Prince of Peace, the ruler of peace. So when you look at the world today, you notice that the leaders of this world are not the leaders of peace. They're actually promoting war, and they profit by it. But we have in the scriptures a promise of the coming leader, the Mashiach, that is to rule and bring peace. And we're going to start with that chapter in Isaiah, chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Let's see here. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Okay. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty El, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there shall be no end, upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, to order it and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth even forever. The zeal of Yahweh of hosts will perform this. So this is so beautiful. So here we find out that this child is the promise of the Messiah, and this child was born, and he was born in Bethlehem, which this was promised, that the ruler would be born in Bethlehem. We find this in the 5th chapter of Micah, verse 2. It says this. Let's see here. Micah 5:2. But thou, Bethlehem Ephratah, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall he come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth have been of old, from ancient times. So we have here, this is the child that was to be born, and out of Bethlehem he was born on this earth. And his rule is to bring forth righteousness and peace and prosperity. And we find in the Psalms chapter 2, verse 6, the Almighty tells about the time when he does put the government on his shoulders of his son. And it says, verse 6 of Psalms 2, Yet I have set my king upon my holy hill of Zion. I would declare the decree. Yahweh has said unto me, Thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee. Ask of me, and I shall give the nations for thee thine inheritance, and the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. So he begins to rule, and he actually gets control over all things. We find that this also takes place, we find in Daniel chapter 7. Let's turn to Daniel chapter 7 real quick. So these are just some prophecies about the reign of the Prince of Peace, the El Gabor, the mighty God. Let's see here. Verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. The one like the Son of Man is Yahshua, the Messiah, that was to receive the government upon his shoulders here, and this is taking place in the heavens. And in a vision, the Ancient of Days is his Father, Yahweh, and there was given unto him dominion. So Yahweh gave to Yahshua dominion and honor and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, in his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. So we find this is in harmony with the vision of the prophet Yeshayahu, Isaiah, that with the increase of his government and of peace there shall be no end. So this government of the Messiah will actually increase and increase and increase continually, and the peace and the blessings that it brings will continue to flourish throughout all time. Now, he does begin to rule, and he has a job to do to remove all the enemies. And the first 1,000 years of his reign is to remove the enemies of mankind, and the last enemy to be removed is actually even death. So at the end of his reign, there will be no death, and everything will flourish, and he will bring life and prosperity into all creation. So we find that this speaks of this in Daniel 7 still. It says, verse 27, and the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. So all creation will obey the Father through the Son, and the Kadoshim, the holy ones. This will be the true Israelites, that they will also take possession of the kingdom. And this kingdom has a heavenly portion and an earthly portion. However, the throne is in the heavens, because Isaiah 66 verse 1 says, heaven is the throne and earth is the footstool. So the actual rulership comes from the heavens. And so the one question is, why is the Messiah, who we're talking about him being a king, why is he the Prince of Peace? Well, one way you could look at it is, the Almighty is the King of Peace, Yahweh, and the Son will never be as great as the Father, even though the Father has given all things to the Son. So Yahshua is the Prince of Peace, and Yahweh is the King of Peace. Now, Yahshua, however, is the King of Israel, the ruler of Israel. He is an Israelite. Yahshua is the greatest of Israel. He is the King of Kings. He's the king over all the other kings of Israel. And now, and he's our ruler. And now it speaks about how, just like David was chosen out of Israel to be the king, we notice here that Yahshua, the son who was given, actually rules on the throne of David, showing that he will actually be called out as a son of David. And we know that Yahshua, when he was born on this earth, came through the seed of David. Now, if we turn to Jeremiah 30, we find that the rulers definitely of Israel are Israelites, and they come from Israel. It says, and verse 21 of Jeremiah 30, and their nobles shall be of themselves, and their governors shall proceed from the midst of them. So we see this, that Yahshua is the greatest Israelite, and he is our governor, he is our king. The governor shall proceed from the midst of them, and I will cause him to draw near, and he shall approach unto me. For who is this that engaged his heart to approach unto me, says Yahweh? And you shall be my people, and I will be your Elohim. So this is speaking of the time of the kingdom, and we happen to live in that time when the kingdom is beginning to blossom, and the Son's presence is here with us, and he is beginning to set up his nation, calling out of the 12 tribes of Israel, so to speak, all his true Israelites from out of every tongue, tribe, and nation, those that strive for the blessings like Jacob to make up his nation. So we find here that when we're looking at the world today, we see that, possibly, the governments are talking about another war with Syria. We know that there's a lot of oppression and unrest in Syria within their own people and the civil war and stuff. And there's many other nations that are having problems, and including this country, America, that we live in, is having problems, and people aren't satisfied, and people are losing their houses and are hungry and can't get a good job, and suffering, and all over the world is suffering. And every time they go into another land to make war, it only makes it worse. Like the Iraq war, they killed 1 million people, and I mean, there's no way that made anything better. This is the folly of man trying to rule himself. But the hope and encouragement that I get from the scriptures, and my only hope and the only government that will ever work, is the kingdom of the Almighty. And it's so beautiful. We see so much prophecy already has been fulfilled, that the Son has actually been given, and he has come. The child was born, a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder. Now his name shall be called Wonderful. He is wonderful, and actually when you get into this, he brings out miraculous things. He does things that are so wonderful. And it says here, and he will also be a counselor. Now, Isaiah 11 goes a little bit more into this. In verse 2, it says, the spirit of Yahweh shall rest upon him, and the spirit of wisdom and understanding, the spirit of counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and fear of Yahweh. So he will actually be able to counsel. He will have the spirit, and he will be able to set matters straight. It continues on and says, and he shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of Yahweh, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. So here we have a destruction coming from this king. But notice how his battle is, his weapon is the breath of his lips, or the rod of his mouth. Well, what comes out of the mouth is the truth, and it's with the truth that he fights this righteous war. So there is a war that he fights, but this war ultimately, the only harm it does is it removes lies and deception and evil and corruption. It doesn't actually harm anyone physically, but it helps purify creation. So this is a righteous war with no casualties except for corruption. That's the only casualty. The devil and his empire and all who want to follow the folly. That's going to be destroyed. But what he does is he brings the truth and causes the truth to cover the earth as the waters covers the sea. And it says here, actually, in the same chapter, verse 9, it says, 11, verse 9 of Isaiah, speaking of the kingdom, they shall not hurt nor destroy my holy mountain. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of your ways, the waters covers the sea. So here we find the result of his rule causes the truth and the understanding of your way to cover the earth completely, like the waters completely cover the sea. And we find that there will be no more hurt, no more deception, no more destruction. And so what he does, slay the wicked with the breath of his lips, with this truth. We find another description of this in Revelation 19, and this is a vision of the Messiah in heavenly form after he left the earth and he went to sit at his Father's right hand before he actually began to rule. But it says this, verse 11, and I saw heaven open, and behold a white horse. So the righteous mission, and he sat upon him was called faithful and true, and in righteousness does he judge and make war. So this righteous battle, which is, like I was just saying, truth against lies, good over evil, Yahshua does lead, and he does everything in perfect love, justice, and wisdom. Before he uses the power, everything is balanced. His eyes were a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. So his eyes being a flame of fire, meaning he has the ability to see past what normal eyes do. These are not normal eyes. He has piercing judicial vision, able to see into the heart and know the motives of the individual. And this gets back to the Isaiah part where it says, verse 3 of Isaiah 11, and shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of your way, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears. But he has the vision that he gets from his eyes are pure and just. Okay, and on his head were many crowns. He has many missions, many jobs. He had a name written that no man knew but he himself. This is the new name. A name signifies a position, and Yahshua is always going to be a position above everyone, and he knows the future, basically, before anyone else does. That's why he is our leader. And if you skip to verse 15, out of his mouth goes a sharp sword. Okay? Now this sharp sword is the truth, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with the rod of iron, and he treads the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of El Shaddai. So we find here that this truth comes out of his mouth. We find in Isaiah 11 that it says, he shall smite the earth, the devil's system, with the rod of his mouth, and the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. This double-edged, this truth, the sword comes out of his mouth. And we find here, just to let scriptures interpret themselves, we find in Ephesians that it says, verse 17 of Ephesians 6, that take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Yahweh. So the sword of the Spirit is the sword that comes out of his mouth, is the word of Yahweh, that actually he uses to smite the earth and destroy the wicked. Now, so there's another scripture that Yahshua prophesied in Matthew 24:14. It says, and the good news of the kingdom will be spread throughout the earth as a witness unto all nations, and then the end will come. So we find here that this is the sword. This is the truth. So this good news of the kingdom, the announcement that the Almighty has nothing to do with Babylon's system, with these governments of the world today, and their wars, and the oppression, and the folly that they have gone on with for all these years. The Almighty has nothing to do with these nations, and in fact, he has doomed the systems to destruction, and he is actually the only government that he sponsors is the one in which Yahshua is the king, and he has enthroned Yahshua and given him the mission to cause truth to prosper, cause righteousness to prosper, and this will be a blessing to all of the humble of the earth, and it will be a great change, and he will be known as the Prince of Peace. And also, it says he will be called, back to Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, he will be called Wonderful. He will be called Counselor, the Mighty El. Okay, now this Trinitarians will try to tell you this is showing us that he is God or something, but really they're not understanding that God, El in Hebrew means a mighty one. And it doesn't mean the Almighty One. Notice it says the mighty El. Well, if you get in the Hebrew, it's El Gabor, and it's means actually like a warrior, the mighty warrior. So Yahshua is a mighty warrior for truth. Now he is called the everlasting Father. It says here. Now, how is this? Well, because the Father is the life giver, and because through him we gain everlasting life. So he's the everlasting life giver. And he is the Prince of Peace. The effects of his rule brings peace. So there is no weapon that he fights with other than the truth. When Yahshua walked the earth as a man, he said, turn the other cheek. He didn't pick up a weapon. He didn't try to fight. He stood his ground. He spoke the truth, and was actually humble and kind, never lifted his hand against anyone. And he gave us the example. He just kept the Torah, and is the perfect example and of a true Israelite. And everyone that follows him will walk in his steps. And he overcame the world by keeping the Torah. He overcame all the deception of the world by keeping the Torah and being true to your way. So he is the truth and the way and the life. Remember, that's one of his statements. He is the perfect living example. And so we all can follow him and be true to the words of your way. So yes, you are tuned in the Kingdom Road Radio Show, and we're going to take a little break here, and I will get right back to you, and we will continue on. Thank you.
You're listening to the Kingdom Road Radio Show on Messianic Lamb Radio, promoting a lifestyle of hope.
All right, I guess we are back. Doesn't look like my songs got programmed. So let's see here. Okay. Excuse me, everybody. I thought I had a few minutes, but there we go. Now we're getting back into it. All right. Okay. So, okay. The removal of war. You are listening to the Kingdom Road Radio Show, and we are talking about the Prince of Peace, and we're going to continue on. We've gone over a lot of prophecies, and this one, we're going to talk about his ability to remove all war. And but first, actually, I did want to play a song for you all. Let's see here. We're going to start, because of the shofar time, we're going to play Jericho Walls for you all.
Jericho walls did crumble and fall. Yeah. So they will at this time. Joshua rules over all. Hey. Jericho walls keep crumbling down. Jericho walls, they keep crumbling down. When people in the city, where you're forced to live, not free. Too much bloodshed and poverty. Man has lost sanity. Out of politics comes and religion free. You know Babylon does nothing and clean humanity. Hail the King, conquering lion, the Nazarene. The walls sleep, crumble down, step down. Jericho walls, they keep crumbling down. They must go down. So the clergy, they might dispute. Set my knowledge, they cannot refute. Judgment must execute. Babylon, your system is doomed. Open the scripture, what do I see? Yahweh, kingdom everlasting. I said your system is of no use for me. It's been a curse, I want blessings. These walls keep crumbling down. The city walls keep crumbling down. Must go down. right. Up to the land of milk and honey we go, but to the land where the blessings flow, as it was written in all the ancient scroll, like the prophets foretold of the system of justice and equality. That's how his kingdom, that's how it will be forever. Blessed, but love will be free. Love will be, but love will be free. Babylon, Jericho, keep crumbling down. Must go down, yeah, yeah. Set the captive free. Set the captive free.
All right. Yes, Jericho walls crumbling down. Yeah, you're tuned into the Kingdom Road radio show, and that was Jericho Walls off the new album, Kingdom Road. You can find it on iTunes or at josephisrael.com very soon. The new website will be up. Thank you so much for your support, everybody on the music. Been receiving so much good feedback. So many of you have been purchasing it. Very thankful. And the music is just for the house of the Most High, for all His people, to encourage and strengthen. And but the most important thing is that we get the message and live for the truth. So here we have, we are studying today about the Prince of Peace, who is the Mashiach, Yahshua, and talking about his government and how it's going to bring in everlasting righteousness and peace. He does have a battle to fight. It is truth against lies, and his weapon is the truth, exposing the devil's system, politics, commerce, and religion, and doing away with it, and bringing out a better system, the perfect system that will replace it and last forever. One of the things that is promised through the scriptures is the removal of war forever. So in this day when we see that billions of dollars are spent on war and made from war, we find here that the Almighty, through his Son, promises to remove war forever. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 2. Isaiah chapter 2 says, verse 2, "And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of Yahweh's house shall be established in the top of the mountains." This is his kingdom. "And it shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. The kingdom has begun. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more." Amen. Notice the law comes from Zion. And we read earlier in Psalms 2, verse 6 and 7, that the Most High sets his Son upon Zion Hill to rule as king. So this is the highest authority in the kingdom. This is the capital city, so to speak. This is where the teachings come from. This is where the sword of the Spirit comes from. This is where Israel gets their weapons. Now, he does use his people to spread this message. Since Yahshua is now in heaven, he's not going to come back and tell everyone personally. He's already told them in the scriptures, but he's going to employ Israel, his people, calling them out of every tongue, tribe, and nation. And as he said, if you do it unto the least of my brothers, you do it unto me. He is with his people, and how the world is going to treat Israel, the Israel of Yahweh, the Israel, the promise, by rejecting them. He says that will be hated of all nations. This will prove how they would treat him if he were here physically. But he gave up his life physically as a man, and now forever lives in heaven. And so Many people are waiting for him to come back as a man or fly down from heaven, and everybody go, look, the Messiah's return. But it's going to be much different than that. And what does return is the truth and the Spirit. And Yahshua himself begins to rule us from a spiritual place in Zion above. Now, those that are going to be with him in heaven is his bride, the ecclesia, the called out members. This make up his body and his closest organization, the closest ones to him. And these make up the New Jerusalem. And we notice that Zion is where the teachings come from, and it's going to fill the earth. So heaven is the throne, and the government is upon his shoulder. He must definitely be in heaven, as it says. So we have to look at all these things. Now, the return of the Messiah, his second coming, his second presence, we'll go over that in another radio show. And if you have any questions or anything, I'm always open to talk about these things and share what I've been shown and what I know to be the truth. And I'm thankful for everybody tuning in today and in the special time. But if we want to find out who's on Zion, we turn to Revelations 14, verse 1. And I saw and looked the Lamb, Yahshua, as we know, he is the Lamb, the Passover Lamb, standing upon the Mount of Zion, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his name and the name of his Father written on their foreheads. So these 144,000 are on Zion or in Zion with him. Now, let's turn to Psalms 46. It's through this rulership of Zion that the world learns war no more, and they turn what at one time were weapons for destruction. They began to use things that were for destruction, for tools to build and plant and bring blessings. Now, Psalms 46, verse 8. Come you and behold the activities of your way, how he has set astonishing events on the earth. He is making wars to cease to the extremity of the earth. The bow he breaks apart and does cut the spear in pieces. The wagons he burns in the fire. So the Multi, come and see what he is doing. He's putting an end to war completely. Now, if you turn now to chapter 48 of Psalms, verse 1 and 2, the way is great and much to be praised in the city of our Elohim, in his holy mountain, pretty for loftiness, or beautiful for situation, the exaltation of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the remote sides of the north, the town or the city of the great grand king, the great king. So the most beautiful place is Mount Zion. Now this is the heavenly city, and there's proof of this, and I'm just going to show you. If we turn to Hebrews, you don't ever take anyone's word for things. Study them and prove them for yourself. It says, beloved, believe not every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether from Elohim, because there's been many false teachers out there, false prophets, and people that have came and spoke all kinds of stuff in the so-called name of the Father. But however, they haven't had the truth. So all I'm saying is I'm showing this stuff to you all today, and I just ask that you would take the time to study it for yourself. So here is proof that the true Zion is in heaven and not on earth. In Hebrews 12, I think, maybe it's Hebrews 13. Let's see here. No, Hebrews 12. And it says, verse 22, but you have approached a Mount Zion and a city of the living Elohim, heavenly Jerusalem, and myriads of angels in the general assembly. Okay, so it's the heavenly Jerusalem, it's the heavenly Zion. In another place, Paul brings out Jerusalem above is the mother of us all. So we find here that the law comes from Zion, the word from Jerusalem. This is what it's speaking of. Behold, I saw the Lamb, and with him 144,000 on Zion. It says in Psalms 2, verse 6 that, let's read it one more time. Even I, have installed my king upon Zion, my holy mountain. So the holy mountain is in the heavens. Heaven is the throne. Earth is the footstool. He does say the meek will inherit the earth. There's definitely a hope for the earth. All I'm saying is the authority, the rulership comes from heaven, which takes us all the way back to the Isaiah 9, verse 7, where it talks about this king and his government. And so the government begins in the heavens, which is why it's called the kingdom of heaven, because this is where the kingdom is. It's in heaven. So it says, let's see here. I'm going to read it in a different translation. To the abundance of princely rule, the abundance of the God of the to the abundance of the government and to the peace, there will be no end. Upon the throne of David and upon his kingdom, in order to establish it firmly and to sustain it by means of justice, by means of righteousness, from now on and to time indefinite, the very zeal of your way of armies will do this. Okay, so this is so true and so beautiful. Read it again in the more accepted translation. I think it reads a little better. Of the increase of his government, there shall be no end. Where is he ruled from? Zion. What is the effect of it? It brings peace. It puts an end to war forever. Beautiful for situation. For the situation is Zion above. I'll read that Psalms in this translation. Psalms 48. Great is your way and greatly to be praised in the city of our Elohim, in the mountain of his holiness. Beautiful for situation. The joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion. The joy of the whole earth, because of this kingdom, this rulership. Look what it does. It brings these blessings to the whole earth. And of the increase of his government, there shall be no end. That means it's constantly going to increase. It will never cease to increase. And upon the throne of David and of peace, there shall be no end. So he is the Prince of Peace. He'll bring an eternal peace that will always increase throughout the universe and beyond what we can even understand. Eyes haven't seen, ears haven't heard the blessing in store for those that love the Most High. Upon the throne of David. Now, David ruled upon the earth. So it's not literally talking about a literal throne, but how is it David's throne? Because David ruled over Israel, and Joshua, who becomes the greater David in the sense, rules over Israel. This brings us to another topic I wanted to speak about. Now, David was a very warlike man. But he pictured the Messiah and the many battles the Messiah has to fight and to overcome. Because remember I said earlier, in the 1,000 years, throughout the first 1,000 years of his reign, he rules in the midst of his enemies, it says in Psalms 110. And then 1 Corinthians 15 says the last enemy to be destroyed is death. He must rule till he puts all enemies under his feet. And the last enemy to be destroyed is death. So that means everything that's fighting against righteousness, everything that's fighting against the people, including death, will be removed. And so that the first 1,000 years is for the restoration of all creation, every plague, every sorrow. And he sits upon the throne of David. What is it? He rules in Zion. Well, David ruled in a typical Zion, and Joshua rules in the real Zion, in heaven above. Okay, upon his kingdom, to order and establish it with judgment and justice from now on, even forever. The zeal of your way of hosts will perform this. Okay, so David having many battles shows that Joshua fights many battles. However, he doesn't use conventional weapons or even ancient weapons. He uses the sword of the Spirit, the arrows of righteousness, so to speak. And he actually wouldn't fight a physical battle. He would fight, or weapons are not carnal weapons. And he instructs his people to never get involved in any of the wars of mankind, and to remain true to Yahweh and stand firm. Okay, so, but we also find another picture of the Messiah is David's son, Solomon, and his name is Shlomo. He is a peaceful man. And it was actually Solomon who built the temple. And under his reign, it was typical of how the Messiah's reign will be, and the result of this peaceful king will actually bring prosperity. It says everybody had a vine and fig tree in the day of Solomon, and that's how we know it truly will be in the kingdom under Yahshua the Messiah, the one that Yahweh sets on the throne. All Israel will follow him, and you know these Israelites are actually also people of peace, and he tells us about them. They're humble and everything, but they're also people of peace. They do not fight wars. We find Matthew 5 says this: "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of Yahweh." So, blessed are the peacemakers. This is those that follow Yahshua. These are Yahweh's people, Yahweh's children. All right. So we're not to get involved in the worldly affairs and the worldly wars, and do not fight or support these nations. Israel is nonviolent, and our stance will be a witness against the wars of these doomed nations. And remember the warning that James or Jacob gives us in James 4:4 that says, "Friendship with the world is enmity with Yahweh. Whoever makes himself a friend of the world is an enemy of the Almighty." So this is an act of hostility. To join sides with one of these countries of the world is an act of hostility against the Almighty, and is a great injustice, and actually excludes one from being one of the Most High's people. The people that are going to be considered his, they bring forth the fruits of righteousness, as we find here in Matthew 21:43. Now the Israel of old was rejected because they didn't bring forth the fruits of righteousness. We find here Matthew 21 verse 43. Yahshua says to them, "Therefore I say unto you, the kingdom of Elohim shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof." So this nation bringing forth the fruits thereof are the ones doing the work. They're the ones being obedient, and this can be from any Jew or Gentile, any nation, any people, any blood. We're all one blood, we're all one people, and male or female, all of us can do this, and the Most High is not partial, and anyone that's bringing forth the fruits thereof becomes accepted in his eyes as his people. So this wisdom from above, it brings a blessed result, and you can know who is actually following this truth. Let's turn to James for a little instruction here on this wisdom from above, the heavenly wisdom. James chapter 3. Okay. Well, first of all, the opposite of righteousness is the wickedness, and that's the wisdom of this world. The wisdom, if you have bitter envying and strife in your hearts, boast not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descends not from above, but is earthly and sensual and devilish. Where there is envy and strife, there is confusion and every evil work. So we find that's what's going on in the halls of these governments and within people in these times. That's why there is so much pain and suffering and injustice. Okay? But the true wisdom that we have to seek, verse 17 of James 3, but the wisdom that is from above is first pure and peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. So again, these are the ones that follow the Prince of Peace. And in his kingdom. They will live forever in his kingdom. It's so beautiful. Now we find here that the king does take his throne. For unto us a child was born, and the increase of his government and of peace there shall be no end. We find in Isaiah 32 verse 1. Turn to it. Behold, a king shall reign in righteousness, and princes shall rule in judgment or justice. So those that rule under the king will also rule in justice. This king rules in righteousness. Now, the righteous king is the one who upholds the Almighty's word, who lives the Most High's word, who keeps his word. Yahshua is the truth and the way and the life, and he is the one who is the righteous king. He rules from Zion above, and he reigns in righteousness. And this will be a blessing to everyone on this earth, because you know that you have this wonderful counselor, this wonderful one who is the counselor, who is a mighty warrior for truth and rights, who gives everlasting life, who is the Prince of Peace. He is the one who, as he rules, it brings peacefulness, a peaceful condition. This is the wisdom from above. This wisdom comes from the invisible, and we feel it here on this earth. It is a heavenly wisdom, a heavenly righteousness, a heavenly peace that comes upon the human race, and his government will last forever. And now, if you go to verse 17 of Isaiah 32. It says this, and the work of righteousness shall be peace, and the effect of righteousness, quietness and assurance forever. And my people shall dwell in peaceful habitations, in assured dwellings, in quiet resting places. So under the kingdom of the Messiah, the way sets up, the work of righteousness shall be peace. So the king reigns in righteousness, his work shall bring peace. The effect of righteousness, quietness, and assurance forever. No one will ever be unsettled. Everyone will always be loved and cared for. Everyone will have everything they need. This is what we're working for. This is the work of Yahshua the Messiah, and the work of the Israel promise underneath the Messiah. This is what we're striving for, to live in the Spirit, to walk in the Spirit, and to be guided by the King of Kings, and to be guided by the Father above. So this is a beautiful thing. And so when you're looking at the world today, and though the world seems like it's on a brink of another Middle Eastern war, and there's already so much turmoil going on, you have nothing to fret about, because you know one day there will be no more war. But let us seek the truth in the Spirit, and to study more, and to be filled with the love and the light, and our prayers and hearts go out to all the people suffering in the war zones, and on all sides, and knowing that people are suffering, and it's so sad, and one day mankind will no longer have to experience these things. And so may this good news of the kingdom be a strength and a comfort to everybody, and continue on seeking first his kingdom, for the king reigns in righteousness, and the work of righteousness shall bring peace. Shall be peace and assurance, quietness forever. And the increase of this government and peace shall always increase forevermore. So my brothers and sisters, you've tuned into the Kingdom Road Radio Show, and this was the show about the Prince of Peace and the righteous rule from heaven above. So thank you, O Most High, for this time with these beautiful people and here on Messianic Lamb Radio. Thank you for your festival day, for the time of Yom Teruah, and this entering into the 7th month. And may everyone be filled with the Spirit. In the name of your Son, Yahshua, Israel's King and High Priest, I pray. Amen. May the way be with you all. Until next week, I say Shalom Aleichem. Have a wonderful festival, my brothers and sisters. Amen.
the promised land. Wisdom is crying, knowledge sings. Famine of your word in the land, kingdom road. We always in the sun, kingdom road. The light of Zion, kingdom road. Redemption time has come, kingdom road. He will lead, we must follow. This is reality, yes I know. Where he leads, blessings follow. That's why we trying on his kingdom road, kingdom road. We always in the sun, kingdom road. The light of Zion, kingdom road. Redemption time has come, kingdom road. Kingdom road. We always in the sun, kingdom road. The Lamb of Zion, kingdom road. Redemption time has come, kingdom
It's a general principle that when we operate in certain frequencies and when we have an attitude of gratitude, happy people attract happy people. That's just the way it goes. So there is an element of truth to it, but you don't need a secret to say things in a certain way so that you can actually invoke certain things. We don't have that kind of power. What we do have the power to do, beloved, is don't worry about the things even in scripture that you don't understand. I once read a quote that said, our problem isn't the 15% of the Bible that we don't understand. Our problem is the 85% that we're not doing anything with. We understand enough about God's word here that we can get everything that we want. We can have a happy and prosperous and healthy life. We can have a fulfilled life. And we can have a happy life even when our health is no good. I was still praising God when I got hit with the flu bug a couple of months ago and felt like I was dying every day. The secret things belong to the Lord our God. Let God keep his secrets. And what he determines that you need, now we seek him out. We want to be in prayer. We want to be asking God. We don't just have the expectation that he's going to just give it to us. We have to work at it. If you seek me, you will find me. If you search after me with your whole heart, he's saying. That's for believers too. That's not just for the unbeliever. That's not just to get saved. That's to find out everything. But let's not worry about finding that secret. We have the secret. The secret is Yeshua. The secret is obedience to him. If you love him, you'll obey his commandments. This is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not burdensome, that we celebrate his appointed times. I'm in the book that I'm writing right now. I'm going through God's appointed times, and I'm going through the reasons why we keep it. Not necessarily, an in-depth analysis of the theology behind it, although I cover some of that, but it's more about this is why we do it. Because it unlocks the secret to success in the universe, which is that we are pleasing to God.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.